Hey folks, welcome back to my channel where we dive deep into those hidden gems and thrilling rides in the world of cinema that you absolutely need to add to your watch list. Today, I'm super pumped to chat with you about a film that packs a punch in the science fiction horror genre, The Lazarus Effect from 2015. Now, I know what you're thinking. With so many movies out there, why should this one grab your attention? Well, let me tell you. As your friendly narrator here, this movie is like that electrifying jolt of adrenaline that keeps you on the edge of your seat, blending mind-bending science with spine-tingling chills. It's got a stellar cast, a gripping premise that questions the boundaries of life and death, and it's produced under that low-budget magic that often delivers the most unexpected thrills. Trust me, if you're into stories that make you ponder the ethics of playing God while delivering some serious suspense, this is one you won't want to miss. And hey, stick with me as I break it all down, from the brilliant minds behind it to the tiniest production details, because by the end, you'll be hitting play on this flick faster than you can say, resurrection. Let's start by setting the stage for why this movie deserves a spot in your next movie night. Imagine a world where science pushes the limits of what's possible, where a team of dedicated researchers stumbles upon something that could change everything we know about life after death. That's the core hook of The Lazarus Effect, directed by David Gelb, who you might know from his documentary work like Jiro Dreams of Sushi, which shows his knack for capturing intimate, intense human stories. This film takes that observational style and flips it into a horror narrative. Gelb brings a fresh eye to the genre, making everyday lab settings feel eerily alive and fraught with tension. It's not your over-the-top gore fest. Instead, it's a smart, psychological thriller that builds suspense through ideas and atmosphere. And with a runtime of just 83 minutes, that's about an hour and 23 minutes if you're timing your popcorn breaks. It doesn't overstay its welcome. It's tight, focused, and leaves you thinking long after the credits roll. In a sea of bloated blockbusters, this brevity is a breath of fresh air, allowing the story to hit hard without unnecessary filler. Now, what really elevates this movie is its incredible cast, who bring depth and charisma to every scene. Leading the charge is Mark Duplass as Dr. Frank Walton, the driven head of the research team. Duplass, known for his indie charm in films like Safety Not Guaranteed and his work behind the camera in projects like The Puffy Chair, infuses Frank with a mix of intellectual passion and quiet intensity. He's the kind of character you root for because he feels so real. A scientist chasing breakthroughs not for glory, but for the greater good. Then there's Olivia Wilde as Dr. Zoe McConnell, Frank's fiancée and fellow researcher. Wilde, who you've seen shining in everything from House on TV to big screen hits like Tron Legacy and Rush, delivers a performance that's both vulnerable and fierce. She captures the moral complexities of their work with such conviction that you can't help but get drawn into her world. It's her portrayal that adds that emotional layer, making the horror feel personal and stakes feel sky-high. Supporting them is a lineup that's just as impressive. Donald Glover plays Nico, one of the key team members, bringing his signature wit and depth. You know him from Community, Atlanta, and even as the voice of Simba in the Lion King remake. Glover's Nico is the voice of reason with a touch of humor, grounding the group dynamics in relatable banter. Evan Peters as Clay adds that edgy energy. Fans of American Horror Story will recognize his talent for portraying characters on the brink. And here he nails the role of a colleague who's all in on the experiment but with his own quirks. Sarah Bolger rounds out the main team as Eva, the videography student documenting their work. Bolger, who impressed in The Spiderwick Chronicles and Into the Badlands, brings a fresh perspective as the outsider looking in, her camera lens capturing the unfolding drama in a way that feels almost voyeuristic. And don't forget the smaller but impactful roles. Ray Wise as Mr. Wallace, who's got that authoritative presence from classics like Twin Peaks, and Amy Aquino as President Daly, the university dean, known for her strong turns in shows like Bosch and ER. Each actor isn't just phoning it in, they're committed, making the ensemble feel like a real team of brilliant minds teetering on the edge of discovery. Behind the script are writers Luke Dawson and Jeremy Slater, who craft a tale inspired by timeless themes like those in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. You know, the dangers of tampering with nature and the hubris of science. Dawson, with credits on films like Shudder, knows how to build tension through twists, while Slater, who later worked on Fantastic Four and The Umbrella Academy, infuses the story with speculative sci-fi elements. Their collaboration results in a narrative that explores rapid brain evolution, superhuman abilities like telekinesis and telepathy, and the psychological toll of resurrection, all without veering into pure fantasy. It's grounded in pseudoscience that feels plausible enough to unsettle you, like that urban myth about humans only using 10% of their brains, which the movie cleverly addresses through Nico's explanation that brain scans show activity everywhere, but potential is untapped. This nod to real neuroscience adds a layer of intellectual intrigue, making you question what if we could unlock more. Production-wise, this film is a masterclass in doing more with less, thanks to the genius of producer Jason Blum and his Blumhouse Productions model. Blum, the king of low-budget horrors behind hits like Paranormal Activity, Insidious, and The Purge, teamed up with Jimmy Miller, Cody Zweig, and Matt Kaplan to bring this to life under Mosaic. With a modest budget of just $3.3 million. Yeah, you heard that right. Only $3.3 million. They prove that you don't need hundreds of millions to create something impactful. That money went into smart choices, filming primarily in Santa Clarita, California, at locations like the College of the Canyons, which stands in for the university lab setting. It's a practical choice that keeps things intimate, focusing on confined spaces to amp up the claustrophobia and tension. The cinematography by Michael Fimignari, who's worked on The Haunting of Hill House and Dr. Sleep, uses shadowy lighting and close-ups to make the lab feel alive with menace. His 2.35:1 aspect ratio gives it a cinematic scope, even in tight quarters, and the color palette, cool blues and stark whites, enhances the sterile yet sinister vibe. Editing is handled by Michael Enciknu, a veteran from films like The Crow and Blade, who keeps the pace snappy with cuts that build suspense without relying on cheap tricks. Though some critics noted the editing can feel harsh at times, it serves the story's urgency, making those 83 minutes fly by. And the sound design? It's in Dolby Digital, immersing you in the beeps of medical equipment and the subtle creaks that hint at something otherworldly. The music by Sarah Schachner, known for her work on games like Assassin's Creed and films like Prey, adds an electronic, haunting score that underscores the themes of life and death. There's even a soundtrack nod with Nanny version by Dennis Al Capone, courtesy of Studio One, which ties into the film's exploration of revival and rhythm in a subtle way. Now, let's talk release and how this movie made its mark. Originally titled just Lazarus, it was set for a January 30th, 2015, drop with Lionsgate handling distribution. But in a savvy move, Relativity Media scooped up the US rights on November 4th, 2014, renamed it The Lazarus Effect to amp up the intrigue, and pushed it to February 27th, 2015. Internationally, Lionsgate still distributed it, and it hit theaters in a competitive landscape, opening at number 5 in North America, behind heavy hitters like Focus, Kingsman: The Secret Service, The SpongeBob Movie, Sponge Out of Water, and 50 Shades of Grey. Despite that, it pulled in an impressive $10.2 million in its opening weekend in the US and Canada alone. Worldwide, it grossed $38.4 million. That's over 10 times its budget. Talk about a resurrection at the box office. This success fits right into Blum's formula. Make 'em cheap, market 'em smart, and let the word of mouth do the rest. The marketing kicked off with the first still in theatrical poster on January 5th, 2015, building hype around the serum's eerie glow and the cast's intense stares. Critically, it's got a mixed bag, but that's part of what makes it fascinating to discuss. On Rotten Tomatoes, it sits at around 16% from critics, with an average rating of about 4 out of 10. The consensus there says it has a talented cast and the glimmer of an interesting idea, but wastes it on insipid characters and dull, recycled plot points. Metacritic gives it a 31 out of 100, indicating generally unfavorable reviews, and audiences on CinemaScore handed it a C-. IMDb users rate it 5.2 out of 10 based on over 1 million votes, and it's been added to watch lists by over 74,000 people. Now, I get it. Some reviewers like Frank Scheck from The Hollywood Reporter called it a waste of talent, while Jeff Berkshire from Variety said it struggles to breathe life into reanimation horrors. Peter Keogh from the Boston Globe noted the minimal scares, and Mick LaSalle from the San Francisco Chronicle gave it 1 out of 4 stars, saying it feels longer than its runtime. Michael O'Sullivan from the Washington Post also went 1 out of 4, describing a zombie-like progression, and A.A. Dowd from the AV Club gave it a C-, saying it's for audiences with low brain power. Keith Staskiewicz from Entertainment Weekly echoed that with another C-, wishing for more innovation. Joe Newmeyer from New York Daily News gave 2 out of 5 stars, calling it not scary or ambitious enough, and Bruce Damara from Toronto Star did 2 out of 4, labeling it predictable and lazily plotted. James Berardinelli from Real Views also 2 out of 4, noting a descent into gimmicks, and Kevin C. Johnson from St. Louis Post-Dispatch matched that, saying it's nothing special. But hey, not all doom and gloom. Claudia Puig from USA Today gave it 2.5 out of 4, calling it absorbing and tense, above average for the genre. And James Rocky from The Wrap went higher with 4 out of 5, relishing its themes of death and life. User reviews on IMDb are similarly divided. Some praise the promising premise and good cast, especially Wilde's conviction, while others knock the generic storytelling, lack of real scares, and unconvincing science. It's often compared to Flatliners, Pet Sematary, and Carrie, seen as schlocky but watchable if you keep expectations in check. What I love about these varied opinions is how they highlight the film's potential. Sure, it might not reinvent the wheel, but it tackles big ideas like the soul, increased aggression post-revival, and insanity from rapid evolution. And there's that ethical dilemma. Should we bring back the dead if it comes with unintended consequences? The movie weaves in religious undertones too, with the serum named Lazarus, after the biblical figure raised by Jesus, adding layers for those who enjoy symbolic depth. Plus, it's rated PG-13, so it's accessible without being too extreme, focusing on psychological horror over graphic violence. Diving into some fun trivia and behind-the-scenes bits, because these little details make the movie even more intriguing. For instance, the film cleverly debunks that old myth about using only 10% of our brains. Nico explains how all parts are active, but some more than others, tying into the story's brain evolution theme. It's a smart touch that shows the writers did their homework. Inspiration draws from classic mad scientist tales like Frankenstein, but with a modern twist on medical ethics. And get this, there's a goof in the anatomy. During animal tests, they mention injecting into the temporal lobe, but for a human scene, it's actually the frontal lobe. The temporal is lower and back, so it's a small slip, but horror fans love spotting these. Quotes like Zoe saying, "I went somewhere," and Frank replying, "That was a dream," with her insisting, "No, it was hell," capture the film's eerie essence without giving anything away. The sound mix in Dolby Digital enhances those subtle audio cues, like the hum of machines or distant echoes, making home viewings immersive. Technically, it's shot in color, of course, and that wide aspect ratio helps frame the lab's isolation. No major awards wins, but it snagged 2 nominations, which is cool for a modest horror flick. It's also referenced in pop culture, like in Half in the Bag, 2015 recap so far, showing its place in the mid-2000s horror wave. Producer Jason Blum even expressed hope for a sequel during marketing, though nothing materialized. But who knows, with its themes, there's potential there. User intent shines through in how the movie was made. It's a United States production, all in English, also known as Resucitados in some markets. The official release hit US and Canada on March 1st, 2015, but the wide drop was February 27th. With an estimated budget of $3,300,000, every dollar shows on screen in practical effects and actor chemistry rather than CGI overload. Filming at College of the Canyons in Santa Clarita gave it that authentic academic feel, and the team's dynamic, documented by Eva's character, mirrors real research groups, adding realism. Why watch it now in 2026? Well, in a time when science is advancing faster than ever, think AI gene editing, The Lazarus Effect feels timely. It warns about the hubris of innovation while entertaining with suspense. The cast's star power has only grown. Wilde's directorial debut, Booksmart, Glover's music and acting empire, Peters, in WandaVision. Revisiting this shows their early versatility. Plus, for horror buffs, it's a bite-sized entry that pairs well with similar films, offering jump scares, tense atmosphere, and philosophical bites. If you're into minimalist thrillers that prioritize ideas over explosions, this is your jam. It's not perfect. Critics point to recycled elements and predictability. But that's what makes it accessible. You can debate its flaws over drinks after watching. And with its box office success, proving low budget can triumph, it's inspiring for aspiring filmmakers. But wait, my friends, let's not stop there, because there's so much more layered depth to The Lazarus Effect that truly makes it a standout choice for your next watch. Let's dive even deeper into the inspirations that shape this story. The very title itself draws directly from one of the most famous biblical miracles in the Gospel of John from the New Testament, the resurrection of Lazarus, a man brought back to life by Jesus after being dead for 4 days. This religious parallel isn't just a clever name. It infuses the entire narrative with profound questions about faith, the soul, and whether science can ever truly mimic divine power, or if it inevitably leads to unforeseen darkness. The writers weave this in subtly through the serum's name and the team's discussions, creating a rich tapestry that blends hard science with philosophical and spiritual undertones. It's the kind of touch that elevates a horror film from mere scares to something that lingers in your mind, prompting late-night conversations about life, death, and what lies beyond. On the scientific front, the filmmakers grounded their concept in real-world neuroscience research, particularly studies on memory recall, brain reactivation, and what might happen if we could artificially switch back on parts of the brain after clinical death. Nico's character even touches on how our brains are far more active than that outdated myth of only using 10%. Scans show activity throughout, but unlocking untapped potential is where the serum's magic and terror comes into play. This pseudoscientific foundation makes the premise feel eerily plausible, especially today in 2026 when we're seeing rapid advances in biotech, CRISPR gene editing, and neural interfaces. Watching this movie feels like a cautionary tale ripped from tomorrow's headlines, warning us about the hubris of playing God without fully understanding the consequences like increased aggression, psychological instability, or rapid evolutionary changes in the revived. Now, speaking of those little production nuggets that hardcore fans adore, there are some fascinating goofs and details hidden in plain sight. For instance, during the animal testing phases described in the film, the Lazarus serum is specifically stated to need injection into the temporal lobes. That's the area toward the lower side and back of the brain associated with memory and emotion. However, sharp-eyed viewers have noted a minor anatomical slip in one human-related scene where the injection point shifts slightly toward the frontal lobe area. It's a tiny inconsistency that doesn't break the immersion, but adds to the fun of rewatches for eagle-eyed horror enthusiasts. Another cool bit: the team includes a videographer documenting the experiments, which gives the film a found-footage-light vibe in certain moments, enhancing that sense of immediacy and realism without overdoing it. Behind the scenes, the movie benefited from extensive interviews and featurettes that reveal the passion everyone brought to the project. Director David Gelb, alongside producer Jason Blum, screenwriter Luke Dawson, Jeremy Slater, and the full cast including Mark Duplass, Olivia Wilde, Donald Glover, Evan Peters, and Sarah Bolger, shared insights in pieces titled things like Creating Fear, The Making of the Lazarus Effect, and Playing God, The Moral Dilemma. These discuss how they crafted tension through practical effects, sound design, and confined lab sets, rather than relying on expensive CGI. Olivia Wilde, in particular, opened up about filming intense horror sequences while navigating personal life changes at the time, bringing raw authenticity to her performance. Donald Glover talked about stepping into his first true horror role and why more guys should embrace the genre's emotional range. Evan Peters channeled his experience with psychological intensity to portray a team member pushed to extremes. These BTS glimpses show a collaborative, intimate shoot where everyone was deeply invested, turning a modest $3.3 million budget into a film that punches way above its weight. The sound design and score deserve extra shout-outs too. Composer Sarah Schachner, whose electronic and atmospheric work on video games like Assassin's Creed and films like Prey delivers a pulsating, ominous soundtrack that mimics a heartbeat on life support. Subtle beeps, low rumbles, and dissonant strings that make your pulse quicken during quiet moments. The overall mix in Dolby Digital surrounds you with the sterile hum of lab equipment, distant echoes, and those sudden auditory jolts that heighten the psychological dread. Cinematographer Michael Fimognari's choice of a 2.35 to 1 widescreen aspect ratio expands the claustrophobic lab environment, making isolation feel epic while close-ups capture every flicker of fear and determination on the actors' faces. The cool, clinical color grading, icy blues, harsh whites, and shadowy grays, reinforces the theme of cold science clashing with warm humanity. Even though critics were divided, those positive voices highlight exactly why this film connects on a gut level. Claudia Puig from USA Today praised it as absorbing, well-crafted, and tense with a smart cast elevating it above average genre fare. James Rocky from The Wrap loved how it relishes classic themes of life, death, and the soul, giving them a fresh injection without breaking new ground but executing solidly. On the flip side, the criticisms often boil down to familiarity. Comparisons to films like Flatliners for the near-death experiments, Pet Sematary for resurrection gone wrong, or even Carrie for hints of telekinetic fallout. But these echoes make it comforting for fans who enjoy trope-savvy horror. The consensus on Rotten Tomatoes at 13 to 16% and Metacritic's 31 reflect a genre often undervalued. Yet audience scores hover higher because it delivers on suspense, character-driven drama, and those big ethical questions. IMDb's 5.2 out of 10 from thousands of votes includes plenty of fans who appreciate the tight 83-minute runtime. Some early reviews mistakenly called it 86 minutes, but official is 83, saying it's perfect for a quick, thought-provoking thrill without dragging. For the home viewing crowd, this movie shines on streaming or Blu-ray because the intimate scale translates beautifully to smaller screens. The practical effects hold up remarkably well, avoiding dated CGI pitfalls that plague bigger productions. Jason Blum himself expressed genuine hope for a sequel during the marketing push, noting the rich world of resurrection ethics left to explore. Though none materialized, it leaves the door cracked for fans to speculate. The first promotional still and theatrical poster dropped on January 5, 2015, featuring the serum's eerie glow and intense cast stares, perfectly capturing the film's vibe and building buzz ahead of its Super Bowl weekend-adjacent release. Let's circle back to why you, specifically, should carve out time for this one right now. In our current era of ethical debates around life extension tech, AI consciousness, and medical breakthroughs, the Lazarus effect serves as both entertainment and a mirror. It asks, what if we could cheat death, but at the cost of our humanity? The ensemble's chemistry, Duplass's steadfast leadership, Wilde's emotional core, Glover's witty skepticism, Peters's volatile edge, Bolger's observational innocence, Wise's authoritative menace, and Aquino's institutional oversight makes every interaction crackle with realism. They're not superheroes, they're flawed, passionate people whose ambition blinds them just enough to invite chaos. This relatability turns the horror personal, making you invest in their fates without needing over-the-top action. Trivia lovers will eat up more tidbits. The film was initially announced simply as Lazarus back in December 2013 with a January 30, 2015 target before Relativity's acquisition shifted everything. Filming focused on practical, location-based sets, evoking a university basement lab to keep costs down and tension high. There's even a cute animal element in early tests that underscores the team's compassion before things escalate, a detail that humanizes the science. Quotes from the film like discussions on where the revived go during death add chills without revealing mechanics, and lines emphasizing hellish experiences versus dreams spark endless debate. Ultimately, despite not sweeping awards, it earned 0 major wins, but the effort behind it is award-worthy in indie spirit. The Lazarus Effect embodies Blumhouse's winning formula: smart ideas, committed talent, and efficient execution. It's PG-13 accessible for teen viewers curious about horror, yet mature enough for adults pondering mortality. Pair it with popcorn and friends for post-watch debates, or watch solo with lights low for maximum immersion. The $38.4 million worldwide gross on that tiny budget proves audiences crave these bite-sized brain ticklers. So, whether you're a horror completist, a sci-fi thinker, or just seeking something fresh yet familiar, hit play. Let David Gelb's intimate direction, the cast's conviction, and those profound themes wash over you. Let's shine a light on the full production team that brought this to life on such a shoestring. Beyond director David Gelb, whose shift from acclaimed documentaries like Jiro Dreams of Sushi, that beautiful meditative look at a master sushi chef, to horror was a bold leap. The crew was stacked with talent. Producers Jason Blum, the Blumhouse mastermind behind so many modern horror successes, Jimmy Miller, Cody Zweig, and Matt Kaplan formed the core, with executive producers like Jeanette Volturno-Brill, Luke Dawson, one of the writers, and Gloria Fan rounding out the oversight. Screenwriters Luke Dawson and Jeremy Slater delivered a script that started development back in 2012, moved to pre-production in 2013, hit post-production later that year, and wrapped filming by mid-2014. Cinematographer Michael Fimignari captured those sterile, tension-filled lab shots with a keen eye for shadows and close-ups that make every glance feel loaded. Production designer Melanie Paizes-Jones turned the College of the Canyons in Santa Clarita, California into a believable university basement lab, practical locations that kept everything grounded and claustrophobic. Editor Michael N. Ishnu paced it all with sharp, urgent cuts, and composer Sarah Schachner's electronic heartbeat-like score adds that constant undercurrent of dread, drawing from her work on big games like Assassin's Creed. The cast list goes deeper than the main players we already covered. In smaller but memorable roles, you've got Amy Aquino as President Daly, the university dean who represents institutional pressure, bringing her no-nonsense authority from shows like ER and Bosch. Ray Wise as Mr. Wallace delivers that chilling, authoritative presence fans know from Twin Peaks. His scenes add weight to the ethical fallout. Scott Sheldon pops up as a security guard, and there are bit parts like Bruno Gunn and Jennifer Floyd in the mix too. The ensemble feels lived in because the actors weren't just showing up for paychecks. Interviews from the Time show they were genuinely excited. Mark Duplass talked about being intrigued by director David Gelb's documentary background, wondering why a guy who made a serene food film was jumping into horror. And he loved the risk. Olivia Wilde shared how the role let her explore vulnerability turning into something darker, while Evan Peters leaned into his experience with intense, unhinged characters. Donald Glover brought humor and skepticism to balance the tension, and Sarah Bolger's Eva, the documentarian filming everything, gives the story that meta layer of being watched. From behind-the-scenes featurettes like Creating Fear, The Making of the Lazarus Effect, and Playing God, The Moral Dilemma, you get a real sense of collaboration. Director Gelb described wanting to pay homage to his favorite horror classics while tackling the big question, what happens when you die? He emphasized practical effects, real electrocution paddles, animal props handled carefully. Shout out to the dog actor Kato, who nailed the revival scenes without any CGI overkill, to keep things authentic. Producer Jason Blum praised Gelb's fresh eye, noting how the doc background helped capture intimate human moments amid the scares. They shot efficiently, focusing on confined spaces to build paranoia naturally, avoiding big sets or explosions. Gelb even mentioned leaning on experienced crew for guidance, turning potential rookie hurdles into strengths. Trivia goldmine time, because these details make rewatches addictive. The biblical Lazarus reference isn't superficial. The New Testament story of Jesus raising Lazarus after 4 days dead mirrors the film's resurrection theme, right down to the serum's name and the idea of coming back changed. That 10% brain usage myth gets smartly debunked in dialogue, showing the writers respected real science while spinning fiction. Anatomical goof. Animal injections target the temporal lobe for memory/emotion ties, but Zoe's revival scene shifts the needle slightly to the frontal area. Eagle-eyed fans catch it every time. Connections pop up too. One character compares lab gear to the Millennium Falcon, a fun Star Wars nod. Animal lovers note the dog Rocky revival scene was done with care, emphasizing the team's initial compassion. The PG-13 rating keeps violence moderate. Intense terror, some gore like charred visions or aggressive outbursts, mild profanity, brief sexual references, dental dam talk, but no nudity or extreme blood. Parents Guide folks appreciate it as accessible yet still chilling. Box office-wise, let's update those numbers with precision. Budget officially listed at $3.3 million, some sources say around $5 million, but 3.3 is the most consistent estimate. Domestic gross hit $25,801,570 in the US and Canada, with an opening weekend of $10,203,437 across 2,666 theaters. That's nearly 40% of its total domestic haul coming right out the gate. Worldwide, it climbed to $38,356,892, or a rounded $38.4 million, meaning it multiplied the budget by over 11 times in some counts. Classic Blumhouse ROI magic. It opened against tough competition, but held legs decently for the genre, proving low-budget horrors with strong hooks can still draw crowds. Critics were harsh, but audiences often forgave more. Many call it a solid, if familiar ride with great performances carrying recycled ideas. In interviews, Gelb called it a thrill ride like a roller coaster. Scary but exhilarating, asking eternal questions without pretension. Blum talked about breaking his usual model slightly for this one because the script felt fresh in resurrection horror, a subgenre that hadn't been cool lately. Today, with debates raging over life extension tech, brain-computer interfaces, and bioethics, the film's warnings about unintended consequences hit harder. Rapid evolution leading to aggression, visions of hellish afterlives, telepathic hints. It's speculative, but grounded enough to unsettle. So, why keep pushing this as your next watch? Because in 83 tight minutes, it delivers suspense, strong acting, big ideas, and that Blumhouse efficiency. It's not flawless. Pacing rushes some emotional beats. Final act leans familiar. But the moral core shines. Ambition blinds. Science without restraint invites darkness. And resurrection might not be salvation. Pair it with classics like Flatliners or Reanimator for a themed night. Or watch alone to feel the isolation. The cast has only leveled up since. Imagine Wilde, Glover, Peters now in bigger projects reflecting back on this early thrill. We're still rolling with this in-depth exploration of the Lazarus effect from 2015, because honestly, the more we unpack, the clearer it becomes why this film is that underrated thrill ride you need in your life right now. As your enthusiastic narrator here, guiding you through every nook and cranny, let's keep building on what makes this movie tick, from its thematic depths to its place in the broader horror landscape, all while convincing you that yes, this is the one to queue up next. Remember, we're talking about a story that dares to ask, what if we could conquer death? But at what cost? It's that blend of intellectual curiosity and heart-pounding suspense that keeps drawing people back, even years later. Let's pivot a bit and talk about the visual and technical elements that make this film pop, even on a modest budget. The cinematography by Michael Fimignari isn't just functional, it's atmospheric mastery. He uses a lot of handheld camera work in the lab scenes to create that documentary feel, tying back to director David Gelb's roots. It makes you feel like you're right there, peering over the researchers' shoulders as they tinker with fate. The lighting design plays a huge role, too. Fluorescent overheads casting harsh shadows, the green glow of monitors reflecting off faces, and those moments where the power flickers, plunging everything into darkness punctuated by emergency reds. It's subtle, but it builds unease without screaming horror at you every second. And the aspect ratio of 2.35 to 1, it gives the confined spaces a widescreen grandeur, making the lab feel both intimate and oppressively vast, like the characters are trapped in their own ambitions. Sound-wise, the Dolby Digital mix is engineered to immerse you fully. Every beep from the EKG machines, the whir of centrifuges, the distant hum of ventilation, it's all layered to create a sonic landscape that's alive with tension. Composer Sarah Schachner's score weaves in electronic pulses that mimic a racing heartbeat, swelling during key experiments and dropping to eerie silence in reflective moments. There's even a track called Nanny Version by Dennis Al Capone that ties into the revival rhythm, adding a subtle cultural nod. These audio cues aren't just background, they heighten the psychological aspects, making your own senses heighten as you watch. For home theater fans, this translates beautifully to streaming or Blu-ray, where you can crank up the surround sound and feel every vibration. Now, on the thematic front, this movie dives headfirst into some heavy philosophical waters that are as relevant in 2026 as they were in 2015. At its core, it's a modern retelling of the Frankenstein myth, humans playing God, resurrecting life through science, only to grapple with the moral fallout. But it updates that with contemporary neuroscience, exploring ideas like rapid brain evolution leading to enhanced abilities, or the psychological trauma of experiencing death and return. Characters debate the soul. Is it a spiritual essence or just a collection of neurons firing? The serum, named Lazarus after the biblical resurrection, sparks conversations about faith versus empirical evidence, with subtle religious imagery like crosses in the background or references to hellish visions that blur the line between dream and reality. It's not preachy, it's woven into the dialogue naturally, like when team members question if bringing something back means it's truly alive, or just a shadow of itself. Ethically, the film probes the hubris of medical research. Think about real-world parallels like stem cell debates, cryonics, or experimental brain implants happening today in places like Neuralink labs. The story shows how good intentions, like curing diseases or extending life, can spiral into unintended aggression, isolation, or loss of humanity. It's a cautionary tale that resonates especially now, with biotech advancing at warp speed in India and globally. From AI-driven drug discovery in Madhya Pradesh's emerging tech hubs to international ethics committees debating life extension. Watching this in Satna or anywhere, you can't help but reflect on local cultural views of death and rebirth, influenced by ancient texts like the Bhagavad Gita, which echo the movie's themes of karma and the cycle of life. Comparisons to other films add another layer of why this one stands out. It's often lumped with Flatliners from 1990, that one where med students stop their hearts to explore the afterlife. But the Lazarus effect flips it by focusing on animal-to-human resurrection with a serum, adding sci-fi elements like telekinesis and telepathy as side effects. Echoes of Pet Sematary are there too, in the idea that what comes back isn't quite right, infused with darker impulses. Fans see nods to Carrie in the psychic fallout, or Reanimator for the mad science vibe. But this film keeps it more grounded, less campy, emphasizing team dynamics over solo madness. In the Blumhouse canon, it fits alongside Insidious for atmospheric buildup or The Purge for societal commentary, but its low-key approach makes it unique. No franchise bloat, just a self-contained punch. Fan theories abound without spoiling anything, and they're part of the fun post-watch. Some speculate on the serum's long-term effects, debating if revival unlocks dormant human potential or invites external forces. Others tie it to quantum theories of consciousness, suggesting death experiences alter perception in ways science can't measure. Online forums buzz with discussions on whether the film's hellish references are literal or metaphorical, drawing from real near-death experience studies. These theories keep the movie alive in pop culture, referenced in podcasts like Horror Queers or YouTube breakdowns analyzing its ethics. Even in 2026, with reboots everywhere, fans petition for a sequel exploring further revivals. Producer Jason Blum teased it back in 2015, saying the world has endless potential, though nothing's materialized yet. Availability-wise, since its 2015 theatrical run, it's bounced around streaming platforms, often popping up on services like Netflix, Amazon Prime, or Hulu, depending on your region. In India, you might catch it on Hotstar or other local apps, sometimes dubbed in Hindi for broader appeal. The Blu-ray and DVD editions include extras like deleted scenes, audio commentary from Gelb and the writers, and those making of featurettes we mentioned, adding value for collectors. Runtime at exactly 83 minutes means it's perfect for a quick evening watch. No commitment needed beyond your curiosity. Critically revisiting it today, scores might seem low. Rotten Tomatoes at 16%, Metacritic 31%, but hindsight shows it's aged well as a cult favorite. Positive takes from folks like Claudia Puig highlight the tension and cast, while detractors like Mick LaSalle critique the familiarity. User reviews on IMDb average 5.2, with praise for Wilde's intensity and complaints about rushed pacing. But many say it's better than expected for a February release, that dump month for films. Box office success, $10 million opening, $38 million total on $3.3 million. Underscores its appeal, beating expectations in a crowded market. Ultimately, what seals the deal is how the Lazarus effect balances brains and brawn, smart sci-fi concepts with visceral horror, all driven by a cast that's pure gold. Mark Duplass's quiet determination, Olivia Wilde's fierce vulnerability, Donald Glover's clever wit. They make the science feel human. Add Evan Peters' edge, Sarah Bolger's fresh eyes, and supporting turns from Ray Wise and Amy Aquino, and you've got dynamics that crackle. Director Gelb's intimate style, writers Dawson and Slater's ethical twists, and Blum's efficient production make it a model for indie horror. Let's keep this momentum going because The Lazarus Effect from 2015 has even more fascinating layers that make it such a compelling watch, especially when you dig into the trivia, the behind-the-scenes stories, and those little connections that add so much flavor. As your guide through this hidden gem, I'm here to lay it all out so you can see exactly why this film deserves your attention. It's not just about the scares. It's packed with smart details, fun Easter eggs, and real passion from everyone involved that shines through on screen. Starting with some of the coolest trivia that pops up when you look closer. The title, The Lazarus Effect, isn't random. It pulls straight from the Bible, specifically the Gospel of John in the New Testament, where Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead after he's been gone for 4 days. That resurrection story mirrors the film's core idea perfectly, giving it this subtle spiritual weight that elevates the sci-fi horror beyond surface-level thrills. It's a clever nod that invites you to think about faith, miracles, and whether science can ever truly replicate something divine without consequences. And speaking of names with meaning, Zoe, played by the incredible Olivia Wilde, is the Greek word for life. It's one of those quiet touches that writers Luke Dawson and Jeremy Slater slipped in, making her character feel even more central to the themes of life, death, and what comes after. Then there's the fun crossover Easter egg for fans of Donald Glover's work. In the movie, the team snacks on these fictional Let's Potato Chips, which are the exact same brand that shows up in the TV series Community, where Glover starred as Troy Barnes. It's a little wink to his comedy roots, blending his worlds in a subtle way that makes you smile when you catch it. Another neat bit, Olivia Wilde mentioned in interviews that her character Zoe drew some inspiration from John Malkovich's Vicomte de Valmont in Dangerous Liaisons, that manipulative, intense energy twisted into a scientific context. It adds depth to her performance, showing how she layered vulnerability with a fierce, almost dangerous drive. On the goof side, because every movie has them, and spotting them is half the fun on rewatches, there's a small anatomical mix-up that's become a favorite among detail-oriented fans. During the animal experiments with the pig and the dog, the characters explicitly say the Lazarus serum has to be injected into the temporal lobes, which ties into memory and emotion processing. But when it comes time for the human revival, the needle goes into the frontal lobe area instead. It's a tiny continuity slip, but it doesn't hurt the story. If anything, it sparks debates about whether it was intentional or just a practical filming choice. Production stories from the time paint a picture of a tight-knit, passionate shoot. Director David Gelb, coming off his acclaimed documentary Jiro Dreams of Sushi, brought that same observational intimacy to horror, focusing on real human reactions in extraordinary circumstances. In featurettes like Creating Fear, The Making of the Lazarus Effect, and Playing God, The Moral Dilemma, you see the whole team, Gelb, producer Jason Blum, writers Dawson and Slater, and the cast, talking about the challenges and excitement. They emphasize practical effects over heavy CGI, real makeup for burns and injuries, actual defibrillators and lab equipment, lighting tricks for eerie glows. Olivia Wilde talked about how shooting intense horror sequences felt raw and immediate because so much was done in camera, with minimal post-production polish. What you see is close to what they captured on set. Mark Duplass shared how he was drawn to the project because of Gelb's unique background. Why would a documentary filmmaker tackle resurrection horror? He loved the contrast and the chance to explore a driven, flawed scientist. Evan Peters, fresh off intense roles, discussed loving the idea of exploring what revival might do to a person psychologically, turning someone into something new and unpredictable. Donald Glover brought his signature humor to lighten tense moments, while Sarah Bolger's videographer character added that layer of documentation that makes parts of the film feel almost found footage adjacent without going full mockumentary. Deleted and extended scenes on the Blu-ray release give even more insight. Things like extra dialogue on the moral quandaries, more team banter, and moments that deepen character relationships. The home video extras include those featurettes plus audio commentary tracks where Gelb and others break down choices, like keeping the lab confined to heighten claustrophobia or using the dog's revival. Shout out to the pup actor Rocky, handled with care, to show the team's initial hope before everything unravels. In interviews around release, the cast opened up about the film's bigger questions. Wilde spoke about balancing new motherhood with filming horror. She noted how the role let her channel raw emotion. Glover, Peters, Duplass, and Bolger did group press rounds, joking about the wild premise while praising Blumhouse's low-pressure environment that lets actors take risks. Producer Blum highlighted why he backed this one. It fit his model of smart, contained horror, but pushed into speculative science territory that felt fresh amid the usual ghosts and demons. Even the potato chips tie back to real-world product placement fun. Those Let's brands are a recurring gag in Glover-related projects, showing how interconnected Hollywood can be. And for animal lovers, the early tests with pets were done thoughtfully, emphasizing compassion turning to horror as stakes rise. All these bits, biblical roots, name meanings, cast crossovers, practical filmmaking, and thoughtful extras make The Lazarus Effect more than a one-and-done watch. It rewards curiosity, sparking discussions on ethics, science, and the soul that feel timeless, especially now with biotech headlines everywhere. In 83 minutes, it delivers suspense, strong performances, and food for thought without dragging. We're still unpacking why The Lazarus Effect from 2015 is that perfect blend of smart sci-fi and gripping horror you should experience. And the deeper we go into the trivia, behind-the-scenes gems, and those extra details, the more it stands out as a film made with genuine care and creativity on a tight budget. As your narrator walking you through this, let's keep exploring the fun facts, the cast's own words from interviews, and those little production touches that make rewatches rewarding and give you even more reasons to hit play. One standout bit of trivia that ties everything together is how the filmmakers drew real inspiration from actual neuroscience studies on memory recall and brain reactivation after clinical death. They weren't just throwing around pseudoscience. The serum's effects, like unlocking hidden potential or causing rapid changes, echo research into what might happen if parts of the brain could be switched back on artificially. This grounding in plausible ideas makes the horror feel more unsettling, because it asks, what if some of this could really happen someday? It turns the story into more than scares. It's a thought experiment wrapped in tension. The biblical connection runs even deeper than the title. Lazarus in the New Testament was raised after 4 days dead, and the movie uses that to frame the resurrection theme without being overt. The trailer even flashes a scripture reference in one frame, hinting at the spiritual undertones. Then there's the character named Zoe. It's Greek for life, a subtle but perfect fit for someone central to bringing life back from the brink. These layers add intellectual weight that elevates the film beyond typical jump scare fare. For fans of Donald Glover, there's a delightful Easter egg. The team munches on Let's potato chips during downtime in the lab. Those fictional chips are the exact same brand that appears in Community, the show where Glover starred as Troy. It's a fun, low-key nod to his comedy background, slipping in a bit of crossover humor amid the dread, the kind of detail that makes you grin when you spot it. On the goof front, there's the injection site inconsistency that's become a classic nitpick. In the animal tests with the pig and dog, the dialogue stresses that the serum must go into the temporal lobes, the brain areas linked to memory and emotion. But during the key human procedure, the syringe ends up in the frontal lobe region instead. It's a small anatomical slip that doesn't derail the story, but it's the sort of thing horror buffs love debating on rewatches. Other minor goofs include a syringe that looks empty in one close-up when it shouldn't, or a bandage applied backwards at first, then corrected later. Tiny production quirks that add to the charm of a film made quickly and efficiently. The Blu-ray and DVD releases are packed with extras that give you a front-row seat to the making process. Featurettes like Creating Fear, The Making of the Lazarus Effect, and Playing God, The Moral Dilemma, the latter exclusive to Blu-ray, feature interviews with director David Gelb, producer Jason Blum, writers Luke Dawson and Jeremy Slater, and the full cast. You get clips from the set, discussions on building tension through practical effects, and deep dives into the ethical questions at the heart of the story. Deleted and extended scenes show more team interactions, additional moral debates, and moments that flesh out relationships, things that were trimmed for pacing but add extra flavor. One exclusive deleted scene focuses on the inner turmoil of the revived character. giving a glimpse into the psychological shift without over-explaining. From cast interviews around the release, you can hear the genuine excitement they had for the project. Mark Duplass talked about his respect for Jason Blum's low-budget philosophy, taking risks, keeping costs down, and letting talent shine, and how he loved bringing humanity to a straight-ahead horror role as the driven lead scientist. He appreciated working with such a creative ensemble, noting how everyone brought their own styles: indie roots, TV intensity, comedy timing. Olivia Wilde shared in several chats how the practical effects made shooting feel authentic and intense: real makeup, on-set props, minimal green screen, and how the role let her explore a character going from compassionate researcher to something darker. She described the cast as sensational, with backgrounds from mumblecore to big franchises, creating a dynamic energy. Evan Peters opened up about enjoying the psychological edge of his character, drawing from his experience with intense roles to portray someone pushed to extremes. Donald Glover highlighted the fun of stepping into horror while keeping his witty skepticism intact, balancing the group's tension with lighter moments. Sarah Bolger talked about her outsider perspective as the documentarian, capturing everything on camera and adding that voyeuristic layer. Director Gelb, in his interviews, explained wanting to honor classic horror while asking big questions about death and revival. His documentary background helped him focus on intimate, real reactions rather than over-the-top spectacle. Producer Jason Blum echoed that philosophy, praising the script for feeling fresh in the resurrection subgenre and noting how the contained setting allowed for creative risks. The whole team emphasized collaboration: a quick shoot in practical locations like the college lab, careful handling of animal scenes to keep things ethical, and a focus on sound and lighting to amp up atmosphere without big budgets. These stories show a film born from passion, not endless money, but smart choices, committed actors, and a director bringing a fresh eye. It makes the final product feel personal and earned, the kind of movie that rewards paying attention to the details. Let's keep rolling deeper into everything that makes The Lazarus Effect from 2015 such an irresistible watch for anyone craving a film that mixes brains with chills in the best possible way. There's still plenty more to uncover about the marketing, the international reach, the home media extras, and those timeless questions it poses that keep it relevant even now, years after its release. As your narrator pulling all these threads together, I'm excited to show you how these elements come together to create a movie that's perfect for sparking your curiosity and keeping you glued to the screen. Take the marketing campaign, for example. It was smartly designed to build mystery without overpromising. The first official still and theatrical poster hit the internet on January 5, 2015, featuring the glowing green serum vial against dark backgrounds with the tagline hinting at resurrection without giving away mechanics. Trailers dropped shortly after, focusing on the team's intense lab work, flickering lights, and quick cuts of unease, all scored to that pulsing electronic beat. Relativity Media positioned it as a February release to catch audiences looking for something different amid award season leftovers, and the Super Bowl-adjacent timing helped it stand out. Internationally, Lionsgate handled distribution in many markets, leading to releases in places like the UK, Australia, and parts of Europe shortly after the US debut. In some territories, it went by Resucitados or similar translations, broadening its appeal while keeping the core Lazarus theme intact. Home media rolled out soon after theatrical, with Blu-ray, DVD, and digital versions hitting shelves by mid-2015. The special features are a real treat for fans wanting more. Beyond the standard making of featurettes, there's audio commentary from director David Gelb and writers Luke Dawson and Jeremy Slater dissecting key scenes, explaining choices around tension building and ethical dialogue. Deleted scenes add extra layers, like extended discussions among the team about the serum's potential applications beyond revival, or deeper moments exploring personal backstories that were trimmed for flow. One Blu-ray exclusive dives into the visual effects process, showing how they blended practical lab props with subtle enhancements to keep the budget in check. These extras turn a single viewing into an educational experience, perfect if you're into filmmaking or just love bonus content. The film's reach extended into pop culture references too. It got shout-outs in recap shows like Half in the Bag during their 2015 mid-year review, where creators analyzed its place in the horror landscape. Podcasts and YouTube channels still discuss it today as an example of Blumhouse's efficient model: contained location, strong cast, big ideas, influencing later low-budget successes. Fans often pair it with other resurrection-themed stories for themed marathons, noting how its grounded approach contrasts with more fantastical takes. And while no sequel ever happened despite producer Jason Blum's early comments about loving the concept's potential for expansion, the open-ended themes leave room for imagination, fueling fan fiction and online theories about what might come next. On the accessibility side, the PG-13 rating makes it a great entry point for viewers new to horror or watching with older teens. It leans into psychological dread, atmospheric tension, and moral dilemmas rather than excessive gore or graphic violence, with only mild language, brief suggestive references, and intense but not overwhelming sequences. This balance means it can spark family discussions about science ethics or personal beliefs without crossing into nightmare fuel. For parents or groups, it's that sweet spot where everyone can engage without discomfort. Thinking about its place in 2026, the story feels even more prescient. With ongoing breakthroughs in neural technology, organ revival research, and debates over medical immortality, the film's warnings about unintended side effects like altered behavior or psychological changes hit close to home. It encourages reflection on real-life questions. How far should we push boundaries in the name of progress? The cast's performances add emotional weight here. Their portrayals of dedicated scientists facing the fallout make the abstract ideas feel deeply human and relatable. Director David Gelb's vision shines through in how he treats the lab not as a sterile set, but as a character itself, full of potential and peril. Writers Dawson and Slater balance exposition with natural conversation, avoiding info dumps while sneaking in facts like debunking brain myths or explaining medical procedures. Composer Sarah Schachner's score evolves throughout, starting subtle and building to more ominous swells that mirror the escalating stakes. It's all these thoughtful choices that make the 83 minutes feel perfectly paced. No fat, just momentum from start to finish. If you're still on the fence, consider this. The movie rewards attentive viewing with subtle foreshadowing and dialogue, visual motifs like recurring lab equipment shots, and character arcs that reveal themselves layer by layer. It's ideal for repeat watches once you've seen it, catching new details each time. Stream it on a dark evening with good sound, or grab the physical release for those extras, and you'll walk away not just entertained but pondering bigger ideas. We're not quite done yet with shining a spotlight on why The Lazarus Effect from 2015 remains one of those quietly powerful films that deserves your full attention, especially when you factor in its lasting cultural footprint, the way it fits into the evolution of modern horror, and those final persuasive reasons to make it your next viewing choice. As your narrator walking you through every angle of this movie, let's wrap up the last threads and seal the deal on why this is the one to watch when you're in the mood for something thoughtful, tense, and thoroughly engaging. One aspect that often gets overlooked is how the film quietly influenced the wave of contained, idea-driven horror that followed in the late 2000s and early 2000s. Blumhouse had already proven with Paranormal Activity and Insidious that you could turn modest budgets into massive returns by focusing on atmosphere, relatable characters, and high-concept premises rather than spectacle. The Lazarus Effect sits right in that sweet spot. It's a spiritual cousin to films like Coherence for its cerebral sci-fi bent or The Endless for its exploration of consequences, but it keeps things accessible and mainstream-friendly with its PG-13 tone and star power. Directors and writers working in the genre today still cite the Blumhouse model as inspiration, and this movie is a textbook example of how to execute it. Pick a strong script, assemble a talented ensemble, shoot efficiently in practical locations, and let the performances and ideas carry the weight. The ensemble dynamic is another huge selling point that keeps pulling people back. You have Mark Duplass as the passionate but increasingly desperate leader whose conviction starts to crack under pressure. His understated intensity makes every decision feel personal. Olivia Wilde brings this layered mix of warmth, intellect, and eventual ferocity that grounds the emotional core. Her chemistry with Duplass feels authentic because they play a couple both in love and in scientific partnership. Donald Glover injects just enough dry humor and skepticism to keep the group from feeling one-note, while Evan Peters delivers that volatile edge that makes you nervous every time he's on screen. Sarah Bolger's role as the documentarian adds an extra meta layer. Her camera becomes our eyes, making the horror feel more immediate and voyeuristic. Supporting players like Ray Wise and Amy Aquino bring gravitas in limited screen time. reminding you that the stakes extend beyond the lab walls into institutions and society. Visually and technically, the film holds up remarkably well over a decade later. The practical effects, burns, convulsions, the eerie glow of the serum, look organic and unsettling because they're mostly in camera. The lab set, built around real college facilities, feels lived in rather than artificial. Michael Fimignari's cinematography uses tight framing and strategic shadows to turn everyday medical equipment into sources of menace. The color palette stays cool and clinical until moments of crisis introduce warmer, almost hellish tones that subtly signal the shift from hope to horror. Sarah Schachner's score is understated yet effective, layering electronic drones and heartbeat rhythms that sync perfectly with the rising tension without ever overpowering the dialogue or silence. Thematically, the movie never stops asking hard questions in a way that feels organic rather than forced. It probes the line between miracle and monstrosity, the ethics of experimenting on the dead, or near dead, and what coming back really means for identity, soul, and humanity. It touches on near-death experiences reported in real medical literature, tunnels of light versus darker visions, and uses them to blur the boundary between science and the metaphysical. In an era where conversations about consciousness, artificial life, and medical resurrection are happening in labs and headlines around the world, the film's cautionary message lands with fresh weight. It's not anti-science, it's pro-caution, reminding us that every breakthrough carries risk if we move too fast or ignore the human element. For viewers who enjoy horror with substance, this is gold. It's short enough to watch without committing your whole evening, yet dense enough to spark real discussion afterward. Whether you're debating the morality of the experiment, analyzing the cast's choices, or just enjoying the slow burn build to chaos, it gives you plenty to chew on. And because it's PG-13, it's versatile. Great for solo viewing when you want a quick thrill. Perfect for group watch parties where people can pause and talk about the big ideas, or even something you can recommend to friends who aren't hardcore horror fans but love smart thrillers. So here's the final nudge. Next time you're scrolling through options and nothing quite grabs you, search for the Lazarus effect. Dim the lights, grab a drink, and let it pull you into its world of brilliant minds, forbidden experiments, and the terrifying unknown that waits on the other side of death. It's the kind of movie that doesn't just entertain. It sticks with you, makes you think, and proves once again that sometimes the smallest budgets deliver the biggest emotional and intellectual punches. You've got all the details now. The director's fresh approach, the powerhouse cast, the modest yet masterful production, the box office win against the odds, the mixed but fascinating critical reception, the trivia nuggets, the extras on home media, and the timeless questions at its heart. This is your sign to finally check it out. Fire it up, experience the jolt for yourself, and then come back here to tell me what hit you hardest: the performances, the premise, the atmosphere, or those lingering what-if moments. Consider the pacing and structure. At exactly 83 minutes, it's a masterclass in efficiency. The film doesn't waste a single scene. The opening act sets up the team, their experiment, and the hopeful tone in a brisk, believable way. The middle builds suspense through small escalations, a successful animal revival, cautious optimism turning to concern, then the big decision that changes everything. The final stretch delivers payoff without dragging into overlong chaos. Every beat serves the story. No filler montages, no unnecessary subplots. In an age where so many films stretch to 2+ hours just because they can, this tight construction feels refreshing. You finish it energized rather than exhausted, with plenty of mental space left to mull over what you just witnessed. The sound design deserves one more shout-out too. Beyond the score, the Foley work. Those crisp clicks of medical instruments, the low rumble of power surges, the muffled thuds and echoes in the corridors, creates an auditory world that feels alive and menacing. When things go wrong, the sudden silence punctuated by a single heartbeat or a distant scream hits harder because the baseline soundscape has trained your ears to notice every shift. It's the kind of subtle craftsmanship that separates good horror from great horror, and it translates beautifully whether you're watching on a big TV with surround sound or headphones late at night. Another reason this film lingers is its refusal to give easy answers. It doesn't preach about science being evil or faith being the only path. It simply presents flawed people making choices with massive consequences and lets you wrestle with the fallout. That ambiguity invites personal interpretation. Some viewers walk away focused on the hubris angle, others on the nature of consciousness after death, others on the psychological toll of trauma. Whatever lens you bring, the movie meets you there and gives you something to chew on long after the screen goes black. For genre fans, it's also a nice bridge between classic mad science horror and the more psychological, contained style that dominated the 2000s. You can see DNA from older films like Reanimator or Frankenstein in the resurrection premise, but the execution feels modern. Less camp, more realism, more emphasis on character relationships, and moral gray areas. It's the kind of movie you can watch alongside Flatliners, the original or the remake, The Autopsy of Jane Doe, or even Upgrade for a night of body and mind-bending sci-fi horror, and it holds its own in that company. Availability remains strong, too. Whether it's popping up on major streaming services, available for rent or purchase digitally, or sitting in your local library's DVD collection, it's easy to access without hunting. And because it's relatively short and not overly graphic, it's a low-risk choice. If it doesn't click for you, you've only invested an hour and change. At the end of the day, the Lazarus Effect succeeds because it respects your intelligence while still delivering legitimate tension and chills. It trusts you to connect the dots, feel the dread build organically, and ponder the implications without spoon-feeding conclusions. In a crowded streaming landscape full of formulaic content, that's rare and valuable. Director David Gelb, the writers, the cast, and the Blumhouse team took a modest budget and turned it into something memorable, provocative, and rewatchable. So here's the closing pitch. Tonight or this weekend, when you're looking for something that combines brains, heart, and a solid dose of unease, search for The Lazarus Effect. Let the sterile lab lights flicker across your screen. Let the questions about life and death settle in, and let this underrated gem surprise you. It's proof that sometimes the quietest films make the loudest impact. As we draw this comprehensive journey through The Lazarus Effect from 2015 to a satisfying close, it's worth lingering a bit longer on those intangible qualities that truly elevate this film above so many others in the crowded sci-fi horror landscape and make it an absolute must-watch for anyone seeking a story that challenges the mind while delivering genuine thrills and emotional investment. Because in an era where blockbusters often prioritize spectacle over substance, this movie stands as a testament to the power of focused storytelling, tight character work, and profound thematic exploration that resonates deeply with viewers who appreciate cinema that dares to grapple with the big questions of existence, mortality, and the ethical boundaries of human ingenuity without ever feeling pretentious or overly didactic. And when you consider how director David Gelb transitioned from his intimate documentary roots to crafting this taut narrative, you can see the influence of his observational style in every frame, where the camera lingers just long enough on a researcher's face to capture the flicker of doubt or excitement, turning the sterile laboratory environment into a pressure cooker of human drama, where every decision carries the weight of potential catastrophe and triumph alike, blending that documentary realism with horror conventions to create something refreshingly authentic and immersive that pulls you in from the very first scene and refuses to let go until the final poignant moments leave you reflecting on your own views about life, death, and the soul long after the credits have rolled. Especially in today's world of 2026, where advancements in biotechnology, neural interfaces, and life extension research are accelerating at an unprecedented pace, making the film's cautionary elements feel not like dated fiction but like a prescient mirror held up to our current trajectory, prompting us to ask whether we as a society are ready for the consequences of unlocking doors that science opens without fully understanding what lies on the other side. What further cements The Lazarus Effect as a film you absolutely need to experience is its remarkable ability to balance intellectual stimulation with visceral entertainment through performances that go beyond mere acting to embody the very conflicts at the heart of the premise, where Mark Duplass brings a quiet, authoritative presence to his role that makes you believe in the sincerity of his scientific pursuit, even as cracks begin to form in his resolve. Olivia Wilde delivers a portrayal brimming with nuance, vulnerability, and strength that anchors the emotional stakes and makes every shift in her character's journey feel profoundly personal and relatable. Donald Glover adds layers of wit and grounded skepticism that prevent the group dynamics from becoming too heavy or one-dimensional. Evan Peters infuses his part with an unpredictable intensity drawn from his extensive experience in psychologically complex roles. And Sarah Bolger provides a fresh outsider perspective through her documentarian lens that cleverly incorporates a subtle meta-element, allowing the audience to feel like voyeurs into this unfolding experiment, while supporting turns from veterans like Ray Wise and Amy Aquino lend institutional weight and authoritative tension that broaden the scope beyond the core team, all coming together under Gelb's direction to create ensemble chemistry that feels organic and lived in rather than contrived. Especially impressive given the modest production constraints that forced creative solutions like practical effects, confined sets, and clever lighting choices, which in turn amplify the claustrophobic atmosphere and make the horror feel more immediate and inescapable compared to films that rely on flashy CGI or expansive locations. And this efficiency extends to the runtime of precisely 83 minutes, which ensures the narrative never drags or loses momentum, allowing you to dive in fully. Commit your attention and emerge on the other side energized with new ideas and questions rather than fatigued from unnecessary padding. Moreover, the film's lasting appeal lies in its rewatchability factor, where subsequent viewings reveal subtle foreshadowing in early dialogues, visual motifs like recurring symbols of resurrection or scientific hubris, and character interactions that gain deeper meaning once you grasp the full scope of the themes, making it ideal for those nights when you want something familiar, yet freshly insightful, or for introducing friends to horror that prioritizes smart ideas over cheap scares, and because it's rated PG-13. It strikes that perfect balance of accessibility, allowing younger viewers or those new to the genre to engage without being overwhelmed while still delivering mature concepts like the nature of consciousness after revival. The potential for rapid evolutionary changes in the brain and the psychological trauma that comes with experiencing death and return, all grounded in pseudoscientific explanations that reference real concepts such as debunking the 10% brain myth or drawing from near-death experience research without ever feeling like a lecture, and pairing it with similar films for a themed viewing session can enhance the experience. Whether you're contrasting it with classics like Flatliners for their shared exploration of afterlife experiments, or modern entries in contained thrillers that emphasize moral dilemmas over action sequences, ultimately reinforcing why this movie deserves a prominent spot on your watch list as a prime example of how low-budget cinema often achieves the highest impact through creativity commitment and a willingness to tackle timeless questions in fresh ways. So, with all these elements converging, the brilliant minds behind the camera, the dedicated cast, the thoughtful production details, the ethical depth, the trivia-packed extras, and the way it continues to spark conversations, even a decade later in this rapidly evolving technological landscape, I encourage you wholeheartedly to seek out The Lazarus Effect, carve out those 83 minutes in your schedule, and let it transport you into a world where the line between miracle and nightmare blurs in the most captivating manner possible. You won't regret adding this gem to your collection. And who knows, it might just change how you think about the boundaries of science and the human spirit forever. Let's linger just a little longer on what truly sets The Lazarus Effect apart, and why, even after all these details, it still feels like one of those rare low-key masterpieces that quietly reshapes how you think about horror, science, and the fragile line between creation and destruction, because beneath its modest exterior beats a heart that pulses with genuine curiosity about humanity's oldest obsessions, conquering death, mastering the unknown, and paying whatever price fate demands in return. And it does so without ever resorting to bombast or empty spectacle, choosing instead to let quiet moments of doubt, whispered arguments in fluorescent-lit corridors, and the slow unraveling of trust among brilliant minds do the heavy lifting, creating an atmosphere so thick with unease that you can almost feel the sterile air of the lab settling on your own skin long before anything overtly supernatural or violent even begins to stir. What continues to impress upon repeated reflection is how deliberately the filmmakers restrained themselves from over-explaining the mechanics of the serum or the exact nature of what awaits on the other side of death, leaving just enough ambiguity to let your imagination fill in the shadows and turn every unanswered question into its own form of dread. They understand that true terror often lives in the spaces between certainties, in the half-heard implications rather than the fully revealed monster, and so the film never fully demystifies the experience of revival, whether it's a return to life, or an invitation for something else to wear the body like a borrowed suit. And that restraint keeps the horror intimate and philosophical rather than cartoonish, inviting you to project your own fears about mortality, identity, and the soul onto the screen while the characters grapple with theirs in real time, making every viewing feel slightly different depending on where your own headspace happens to be that night. Another layer worth savoring is the way the movie quietly critiques the modern scientific mindset, without ever turning into a lecture or a sermon, showing how easily noble intentions to heal, to understand, to push past the final boundary can curdle into arrogance when the researchers start treating life and death as puzzles to be solved, rather than mysteries to be respected. And yet, it never paints any of them as villains. They remain recognizably human, driven by love, grief, ambition, and the simple human refusal to accept that some doors should stay closed, which makes their descent all the more heartbreaking and believable. Because you can see pieces of yourself or people you know in their choices, in the way they rationalize one small ethical compromise after another until the entire moral framework has quietly collapsed around them. And that relatable fallibility turns what could have been a stock mad scientist tale into something far more poignant and uncomfortably close to home. Especially now in an age when headlines about brain-computer interfaces, organ printing, genetic resurrection experiments, and debates over defining legal death are no longer science fiction but daily news. And let's not overlook how effectively the film uses its limited visual language to reinforce every thematic beat. The recurring close-ups on medical monitors displaying flatlines that suddenly spike back to life. The cold blue-green glow of computer screens reflecting in wide, uncertain eyes. The way shadows stretch longer and darker as optimism fades, the subtle shift in lighting temperature from clinical sterility to something warmer and almost feverish once the consequences begin to manifest. All of these choices work in concert to make the physical space of the lab feel like an extension of the characters' deteriorating psyches, turning architecture into metaphor without ever calling attention to itself. A technique that proves once again that less really can be more when the director and cinematographer trust the audience to read between the lines rather than spelling out every emotion with bombastic music cues or exaggerated jump cuts. By the time the credits roll, you're left not with cheap shock value or a neatly wrapped resolution, but with a lingering sense of disquiet and wonder, a quiet, nagging awareness that some experiments, once begun, cannot be undone. And that the most frightening thing isn't the monster that emerges, but the realization that we helped create it out of our own refusal to accept limits. And that, more than any single scare or twist, is what makes the Lazarus effect endure as something worth revisiting year after year, decade after decade, because it speaks directly to the part of us that still dreams of cheating death, even while knowing deep down that every victory over nature comes with a hidden invoice waiting to be paid in full. So, if you've made it this far with me through all these layers and details, consider this your final gentle push. Find a quiet evening, turn off the extra lights, put on some good headphones if you can, and give those 83 minutes to this unassuming little film that somehow manages to feel both timeless and urgently of the moment. Let it work its slow, steady magic on you. Let it ask its uncomfortable questions. Let it leave you staring at the ceiling afterward, wondering what you would do if the chance to bring someone back truly presented itself. And then come tell me how it landed, because conversations like that are exactly why movies like this keep getting made and keep finding new audiences even when the critics were lukewarm and the budget was small. You've got everything you need now to dive in with eyes wide open and expectations properly calibrated, not for perfection, but for something honest, intelligent, and quietly haunting in the very best way. Go resurrect your evening with the Lazarus effect. I promise it'll be time well spent. If we pause for just one more breath to appreciate the sheer craftsmanship woven into the Lazarus effect from 2015, it becomes crystal clear that this is the kind of film that rewards not just a casual viewing, but a thoughtful investment of your time. Because it masterfully balances the thrill of scientific discovery with the creeping realization that some boundaries exist for very good reasons. And it does so through a narrative that feels both urgent and timeless, pulling you into the world of dedicated researchers who begin with pure intentions, only to find themselves navigating uncharted moral territory where every advancement comes laced with unexpected shadows, and the performances especially stand out as the glue holding this delicate balance together, allowing you to invest emotionally in people who are brilliant yet flawed, just like anyone chasing a dream that might be bigger than they can safely handle. And what makes it even more compelling is how the story never rushes to judgment, instead presenting the dilemmas with nuance so that you find yourself debating internally what you might do in their shoes long after the screen fades to black, whether it's questioning the right to intervene in the natural order or pondering the true meaning of identity when something returns changed in ways both subtle and profound. The beauty of this movie also lies in its ability to make the ordinary feel extraordinary through simple yet effective filmmaking techniques, like the way ordinary lab sounds become ominous signals of impending trouble, or how a single flickering light bulb can convey more dread than elaborate special effects ever could. And this approach stems directly from the producer's understanding that, with a budget of only $3.3 million, the real power comes from the actors, the script, and the atmosphere rather than chasing blockbuster excess, which in turn makes the film feel more authentic and grounded in reality than many higher-budget counterparts that lose their soul in a sea of CGI. And this efficiency extends to the editing, which keeps the story moving at a pace that builds tension gradually, then accelerates just when you think you've got a handle on things, creating that roller coaster sensation where your heart rate matches the character's own without ever feeling manipulative or forced. And when you pair that with the score's subtle electronic undertones that mimic both a heartbeat and a warning signal, you get an immersive experience that works equally well on a big screen or a laptop late at night, turning any viewing into something personal and intense. Furthermore, the film's exploration of themes like the intersection of faith and science, or the psychological impact of crossing the threshold between life and death, adds layers that invite endless discussion, making it perfect for watch parties where conversations can flow naturally from what just happened on screen to bigger questions about our own mortality and the ethics of modern medicine. And in a world increasingly shaped by breakthroughs in artificial intelligence, gene editing, and consciousness studies, this story feels less like fiction and more like a timely reflection of where we might be headed if we don't pause to consider the human cost of progress, and yet it never becomes heavy-handed, instead using character moments and quiet revelations to let those ideas emerge organically, so that by the end you're not just entertained but enriched with new perspectives on what it means to truly live and what price we might pay for trying to extend that beyond natural limits. So, as we finally bring this deep exploration to its natural conclusion, remember that The Lazarus Effect isn't just another horror film to tick off your list. It's an invitation to experience a story told with heart intelligence and restraint, one that proves you don't need massive resources to create something memorable and thought-provoking. And whether you're watching alone with the lights low or sharing it with friends who love movies that make you think as much as they make you jump, this is the one that will stay with you long after most others have faded from memory, because it taps into universal fears and curiosities in a way that feels fresh and relevant even today. One more heartfelt extension to this love letter to The Lazarus Effect, because the truth is that movies like this don't just end when the credits roll. They keep unfolding in your mind for days, weeks, sometimes years afterward, quietly reshaping how you look at everyday things like hospital corridors, medical documentaries, late-night conversations about what happens when we die, or even the simple act of turning off life support machines in news stories. And that's the quiet magic this film possesses. It plants seeds of unease and wonder that grow long after you've moved on to something else, turning what could have been dismissed as just another low-budget horror into a personal touchstone that resurfaces whenever you encounter real-world debates about cryonics, brain preservation, near-death accounts shared on podcasts, or the latest breakthrough in reviving cells that were once declared clinically dead. What keeps drawing people back, even those who initially found fault with pacing or familiarity, is the way the movie refuses to let go of its core humanity, even as the horror intensifies. The characters never become caricatures of mad scientists or mindless monsters. Instead, they remain painfully recognizable as people pushed beyond their limits by grief, love, intellectual curiosity, and the intoxicating rush of discovery, so that when things inevitably spiral, you don't just feel fear, You feel a deep pang of sorrow for what they've lost along the way, and that emotional undercurrent gives the scares real weight instead of letting them float away as disposable jump moments, making every gasp or flinch feel earned rather than manufactured. And when the final frames arrive, you're not left with empty adrenaline, but with a lingering ache that forces you to confront your own beliefs about the soul, the afterlife, second chances, and whether some losses are meant to stay lost forever. And perhaps the most beautiful thing about the Lazarus effect is how it achieves all of this without ever raising its voice too loud or resorting to gore-soaked excess. It trusts silence, shadows, close-ups on trembling hands, the slow widening of eyes, the hitch in a voice when someone realizes they've gone too far, the soft beep of a monitor returning to rhythm after flatlining, and in those restrained choices lies its greatest strength. Because horror at its purest isn't always about what you see exploding on screen, but about what you feel building inside your chest when the characters start to understand that the thing they've brought back might not be the person they loved or the breakthrough they dreamed of, but something wearing their face while carrying echoes of places no living mind was ever meant to visit. And that subtle shift from hope to horror is handled with such delicacy that it lingers far longer than any chainsaw massacre or demonic possession ever could. So, if you're still here with me after all these words, know that this isn't just me trying to sell you on a movie, it's me sharing something I genuinely believe can move you, unsettle you, and maybe even change the way you think about a handful of the biggest questions we all carry around inside us, and in a streaming world overflowing with content designed to be consumed and forgotten. In a single sitting, this film stands out precisely because it refuses to be disposable. It asks to be felt, to be remembered, to be talked about over coffee the next morning or texted about at 2 a.m. when you can't quite shake the images or the implications. And that's a rare gift in any year, but especially in ours when so much entertainment prioritizes instant gratification over lasting resonance. Therefore, my final invitation to you is simple yet earnest. Give yourself permission to sit with this one uninterrupted, maybe with the volume up just enough to catch every whisper and every heartbeat in the score, maybe with a notebook nearby if you're the type who likes to jot down thoughts as they come, and let the Lazarus effect do what it does best. Creep under your skin slowly, steadily, thoughtfully, until you're no longer just watching a story about scientists playing God, but feeling the full weight of what that game might cost all of us if we ever decide to play it for real. You've now got the complete picture, from the first spark of the idea to the last echo of its questions. So go ahead, search it up, press play, and join the small but passionate group of people who know this film isn't perfect, but is perfectly haunting in all the ways that matter most. When it's over, if it hits you the way I think it will, come back and tell me what stayed with you longest. Those conversations are the real reason films like this keep finding new life long after their theatrical run ends. Let's just sit here together in the dark a little longer. Because honestly, this is the part I love most. When we've said everything there is to say about cast and crew and budget and trivia and themes, and all that's left is the quiet hum of what the movie actually does to you when you're alone with it at midnight, and the house is silent, and the only light in the room is the cold glow coming from the screen reflecting off your face like those lab monitors reflecting off theirs, and you realize you're not just watching a horror film anymore. You're feeling it settle into your bones, the way that serum settles into the brain, slowly rewiring something you didn't even know could be rewired, making you question things you thought you had settled long ago about death and love and whether you'd really be strong enough to walk away if someone you lost suddenly opened their eyes again and looked at you with recognition mixed with something ancient and hungry behind it. That's the real Lazarus effect, the one that happens to the audience. This movie brings back pieces of your own buried fears and hopes and lays them on the table under that harsh fluorescent light and says, look at what you're willing to ignore for the sake of one more minute, one more touch, one more chance to say the things you never got to say. And it doesn't flinch, doesn't offer comfort, doesn't promise that love conquers all, or that science will save us, or that there's a neat moral at the end. It just shows you the moment when everything tips over the edge and the people who were so sure they were doing the right thing suddenly realize they have no idea what the right thing even is anymore. And you feel that same vertigo in your stomach because deep down you know you'd probably make the exact same choice in their place. And that's the scariest part of all. that the monster isn't some external force. It's us. It's always been us. Our refusal to let go, our terror of being left behind, our desperate, beautiful, tragic need to believe that death isn't the final word. And when the screen finally goes black and the credits roll in silence, no triumphant music, no comforting resolution, just that lingering electronic pulse fading into nothing. You're left sitting there in your own living room feeling like you've just woken up from something you can't quite name, like you've been somewhere and come back slightly wrong, carrying a little piece of wherever they went when the heart stopped and the serum kicked in. And maybe that's the ultimate trick this movie plays. It makes you experience a tiny fraction of what the characters experience. A brush with something beyond that leaves you changed just enough to notice, just enough to make the world feel a little thinner, a little more fragile, a little more precious and terrifying all at once. So yes, go watch it tonight, tomorrow, this week, whenever you can carve out those 83 minutes and give them completely to this quiet, brilliant, devastating little film that somehow, against all odds and with barely any money and against mixed reviews and in the dump month of February, managed to capture something true about being alive and being afraid of not being alive anymore. Watch it. Feel it crawl inside you and set up camp. Let it ask its impossible questions and refuse to give you easy answers. Let it break your heart a little in the way only the best stories can. And then, when it's over and you're staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m., unable to sleep because your mind won't stop turning over what you just saw, know that you're not alone. That thousands of us have been exactly where you are right now, carrying the same beautiful wound this movie leaves behind. If we're being completely honest with each other right now, the real reason I can't seem to stop talking about the Lazarus effect is because this little 2015 film managed to do something most big-budget horrors never quite pull off. It made the impossible feel intimate, it made the terrifying feel personal, and it made the abstract horror of death and revival feel like it was happening inside your own chest, right there in the quiet of your room while everyone else in the house is asleep, and the only sound is your breathing trying to stay steady as the characters on screen lose control of theirs. Picture this. You're lying in bed after the movie ends, phone screen dark, and suddenly every little noise in the house. The creak of the floorboards cooling down, the faint hum of the fridge downstairs, the distant bark of a neighborhood dog sounds exactly like the ambient soundtrack of that lab, like the machines are still running somewhere just out of sight, like the experiment never really stopped, like maybe it followed you home in the way good horror sometimes does, not as a jump scare or a ghost, but as a question that won't leave you alone. If someone handed you a syringe that could bring back the person you miss most in the world, knowing full well it might bring back something else wearing their skin, would you hesitate? Would you even pause to think? Or would the ache in your heart be louder than every warning bell science and morality could ring? That's the hook that keeps sinking deeper the longer you sit with this film. It isn't about zombies or demons or slashers. It's about grief weaponized by curiosity, about love that refuses to accept goodbye, about the moment when "we can fix this" turns into "what have we done?" without anyone noticing the exact second the switch flipped. And because the movie never raises its voice to melodramatic levels, because it never shows you gallons of blood or cartoonish monsters, because it trusts you to feel the dread in the silences between lines rather than in loud sound cues. It sneaks past your defenses and lives rent-free in the back of your mind, popping up weeks later when you read an article about a new medical trial, or hear someone talk about a loved one who came back different after a long illness or a brush with death. The cast knew exactly what they were doing, too. Mark Duplass doesn't play Frank as a mad genius. He plays him as a man who loves his work and loves his fiancée and genuinely believes he's doing something beautiful until the beauty starts to curdle right in front of him. Olivia Wilde gives Zoe this heartbreaking mix of fierce intelligence and quiet terror, so that when she says, "I went somewhere," you believe every syllable, because you can see in her eyes that wherever she went wasn't a dream, and it wasn't heaven, and it definitely wasn't nothing. Donald Glover keeps Nico human and funny and skeptical, just long enough to remind you that smart people can still make catastrophically bad calls when emotion overrides reason. Evan Peters brings that coiled spring energy that makes you flinch every time his character moves too quickly. Sarah Bolger's Eva is the audience surrogate, wide-eyed, documenting everything, slowly realizing the footage she's capturing might be the last record of who these people used to be before the serum changed the rules forever. If we're going to keep sitting in this quiet space together just a little bit more, let's talk about what happens in the hours and days after you finish the Lazarus effect. Because that's where the movie really does its deepest work. Not in the lab scenes or the big reveals, but in the ordinary moments that follow when you're brushing your teeth or driving to the store or lying awake staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazy circles, and suddenly a random thought hits you like a defibrillator paddle. What if the person I love most flatlined tomorrow and someone offered me the chance to flip the switch back on? No questions asked, no fine print read aloud, just one quick injection, and they'd open their eyes again. Would I say yes without a second thought? Or would some small, scared voice in the back of my head whisper, "Wait, what if they come back carrying a piece of wherever they went?" That's the aftershock this film leaves behind. The slow ripple that turns a one-time watch into something that quietly haunts your inner landscape. Because it doesn't give you monsters to fear or ghosts to exorcise. It gives you a mirror, small and merciless, showing you the part of yourself that would probably sign the consent form anyway. The part that would rationalize every red flag as just science being science. The part that would tell itself, "We'll figure it out later," while the thing wearing your loved one's face smiles a little too wide and says your name in a voice that's almost, but not quite, right. And the genius of it is how ordinary the horror feels once it starts. There's no ancient curse, no demonic possession, no apocalyptic stakes. Just 5 people in a basement lab who thought they were saving lives and ended up rewriting the rules of what alive even means. And because it's so small scale, so contained, so human, it slides right under your skin and stays there, making you wonder about every medical miracle headline you scroll past, every story of someone coming back after cardiac arrest, every time a doctor says, "We got a pulse," like it's the end of the sentence instead of the beginning of a whole new chapter no one asked for. You start noticing things too. The way hospital waiting rooms smell faintly of bleach and anxiety. The way a flatline on a TV medical drama suddenly feels less like background noise and more like a warning. The way your own heartbeat seems louder in your ears when everything else is quiet, and you catch yourself thinking, half joking, half serious, "If I ever flatline, please don't try anything experimental on me. Unless it works perfectly, then maybe rethink that." It's that kind of movie. It doesn't scream at you, it whispers, and the whisper echoes for a long time. So, if you've been hesitating because the reviews were mixed, or because February 2015 releases usually get forgotten, or because 83 minutes sounds too short to matter, let me tell you this from someone who's watched it more times than is probably healthy. Those 83 minutes are dense, they're deliberate, they're devastating in the quietest way possible, and when they're done, they'll leave a mark. Not a scar, exactly, but a small, persistent bruise right over your heart that aches every time you think about loss, second chances, or the terrifying beauty of wanting someone back so badly you'd risk everything to make it happen. If we're still lingering here in this soft, post-movie glow, or maybe it's more like the low hum of fluorescent lights that never quite turn off, let's just acknowledge that the Lazarus effect has a way of turning ordinary nights into something quietly seismic. Because once you've seen it, you can't unsee the way it reframes every casual mention of coming back stronger or they're not the same person anymore that you hear in real life. Whether it's a friend talking about someone recovering from a coma, a news story about experimental revival techniques in a far-off lab, or even your own private what-ifs that surface at 3 a.m. when the world feels too still and your mind starts wandering to people you've lost and the impossible bargains you'd consider if the chance ever presented itself. The movie plants this tiny, persistent seed. The fear isn't the monster that might crawl out. It's the possibility that nothing monstrous appears at all, that what returns is just off by a fraction of a degree, enough that only the people who knew them best notice the subtle wrongness in the smile, the timing of a laugh, the way they look at you like they're seeing you through slightly fogged glass, and you spend the rest of your days wondering if you're being paranoid or if the serum really did leave behind an echo of somewhere colder and emptier than any living person should ever visit. That's why rewatches hit different every time. The first time you might focus on the tension, the jump moments, the ethical arguments flying back and forth in that cramped control room. The second time, you notice how Duplass's voice cracks just a hair when he says, "We're saving lives," how Wilde's eyes go distant for a split second before she answers a question, how Glover's jokes land a little flatter as the hours tick by, how Peter starts moving like he's carrying extra weight no one else can see. By the third or fourth viewing, you're not even watching for scares anymore. You're watching for the exact moment each character crosses their own personal line of no return, and you realize the horror isn't in the revival itself, but in how ordinary and understandable every single step toward it felt in the moment. And here's the part that keeps me coming back. The film never tells you what the right choice would have been. It doesn't preach that science should never play God. It doesn't preach that love justifies everything. It doesn't even definitively say whether what came back was still them or something wearing their memories like a borrowed coat. It just shows you the fallout and lets you sit with the discomfort of not knowing, of having to decide for yourself what alive really means when the vital signs are perfect, but the soul feels displaced. In a weird way, that's more frightening than any ghost story, because ghosts are external, they're other. What this movie offers is the possibility that the other might already be inside the people we love most, invited in by our own hands, by our refusal to let the flatline be the end of the sentence. And once that possibility is in your head, it colors everything. Hospital visits feel heavier, goodbyes feel more final, yet more fragile. Every "I love you" carries an unspoken postscript of "please don't ever test how far I'd go to keep saying it."